Hey everybody, welcome to the first of two panels that we're running today at IaCConf. This one is all about platform engineering in the age of AI teammates. What does that mean for your platforms, your golden paths, things that you've built? And so I've got a really great lineup here today. Luca Galante from Weave Intelligence, what you might also know as platformengineering.org or PlatformCon. He's going to be our moderator. Joined by Faisal from Ahead, Eric Maxwell from Google, and Chris Hesse from Mondelez. I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves, but first I'm going to hand it over to Luca, who is going to kick off and moderate this panel. Over to you, Luca.
Thank you, Gareth, and thank you everyone for being here, and to our host, Spacelift, for putting together this amazing event, which I believe is in year 2. I'm Luca, your moderator for the panel today. I've been a contributor to the platform engineering community for the last 5+ years. I host PlatformCon, which is the largest event in the space, and I guess I send out what I think are funny memes in my newsletter every week. But the TLDR is I speak to many platform engineers about platform engineering. So good that the topic today is platform engineering. Today, we want to talk about how this trend, platform engineering, which has really been one of the key trends in enterprise over the last few years, is evolving in the age of AI and the age of agents. I think, what we are seeing in the community is a lot of enterprises are quickly realizing that if you want to move beyond a day zero impressive AI demo, and into something that's actually enterprise grade, day 100 prod ready, when it comes to AI and agentic workflows, you need a well-designed platforms. And so that's really what we want to discuss today. We are going to structure the conversation in 3 acts, so to say. Really just recap briefly, what are platforms in terms of, what are the platforms that we have today that we've built for humans? How do we need to adapt those in the age of AI and for agents? And then we want to leave you with some concrete learnings that hopefully you can take away and apply in your org. So that's really the setting for today's conversation. So I'll go around the horn now and just let everybody introduce themselves. And maybe I'd love to actually hear from the panelists, together with your introduction, in one sentence, also, what is the most surprising thing that AI agents, everything that we're living through in the industry has actually changed about how you think about platforms? So let's start with you, Chris, and then we can go to Faisal and Eric.
Sure. Sorry, hard time getting off mute there. So, hi everybody. I'm Chris Hesse. I'm currently the CTO at Mondelez. You might not know the name Mondelez, but you probably know Oreos and Cadbury and Swedish Fish and Sour Patch Kids. We make all of those. I started here 5 years ago, actually with a team of 0, with the kind of goal of standing up what we now call a platform engineering team 5 years ago in the cloud. One of the first purchases actually we made was we became a Spacelift customer. So not the first customer, but we were pretty early in that journey, and really have leaned into all of what platform engineering is today. I would say, I think you asked the most surprising thing. I mean, it's obvious, I guess, to all of us, but it definitely was a shock to me when I realized the things that I had on my roadmap that were never important enough to give to a team member, but something I always wanted. Now, all of a sudden, all of these features and capabilities are, a couple of hours of watching an agent spin and being able to have it and actually using it in production. So I would say that's my biggest, I never thought we would get this far this quickly. So that's me. Thanks for having me.
Faisal, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Faisal, Principal Enterprise Architect and recovering infrastructure engineer with over, 20+ years of scars from cloud migrations, Kubernetes journeys, and yes, convincing executives, right, that monolith actually does need to go. and here's how the best way to address it, right? As a principal at Ahead, I continue spending time with our customers around platform engineering, developer experience, and enterprise automation. I'm also a platform engineering ambassador, and I work pretty closely with Luca and his team based out of sunny San Diego. And I think what the question was, if there's anything specific that comes to mind that is very obvious in the era of AI and integration into platform. And I would say that infrastructure that is both human readable and machine operable, right? Because we're producing these platforms, we're building these platforms, and some of the things from the past are still applicable. But one thing that is new is how do you build platforms for agents, right? And so, yep, that's a little bit about itself, and passing it on to, I guess, the next person.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Eric Maxwell. I'm a researcher on the DORA Project. I'm also one of the authors of the annual reports that we put out every year. And then also at Google, I run a consulting practice that we call 10x Technology. And what we do in our consulting practice is we take the learnings and the research that we do on the DORA Project, and then we work with customers every day to help them understand the research. How do you use the research to improve your engineering ability? The interesting thing for those of you that follow our research is for the last 3 years in a row, we've studied AI and platform engineering. And that's not going to change in 2026. So we're currently putting together the survey and trying to figure out, the direction that we want to go. And we will go in some additional interesting directions, but the core of our focus will be around AI and platform engineering. And to answer the question directly about what was surprising to me, to be honest, I think the most surprising thing to me happened toward the end. Coding agents started working, and the rate at which they improved from around November, December of last year to today. If I'm being completely honest, I wasn't really interested in AI coding that much. It kind of sucked, but that's a totally different story today. And the way that everything is moving with orchestration and custom harnesses. It really is quite amazing. And in fact, I'm quite literally writing code as we speak in another window as I'm doing this panel. So it's a total game changer, and I'm very, very excited for it.
That's awesome. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I agree. Like, I think the what was it, like 4.5, the Opus 4.5 codex, like in November, December, that I think was like the moment that everyone was like, oh. And thank you also for the DORA research, and it's something that I think the entire industry really just kind of like waits for every year. It's I've actually referenced the 25 report quite a bit in the last few months, because I remember there was this like prediction by Gartner like 3-4 years ago of like, by 2026, like 80% of enterprises will be evaluating platform engineering initiatives. And then actually your report came out that like 90% of the companies that you surveyed already had some sort of like platform initiative in place. So, and I remember when Gartner came out with that prediction like 5 years ago, I was like, there's no way. And so I guess that's another example of something where we're just, like the reality is beating even our like most aggressive expectations, it seems. Okay, so, I mean, let's get into it. So Act 1, right, before we talk about like what AI is changing, I think it'd be great to get specific about what have we built until now, and really like who we built it for. Hint is humans. And so maybe Chris, let's start with you. So you mentioned, right, you built Mondelez platform greenfield, basically, so from zero to I think it's like 700 plus AWS accounts, like Spacelift is in there, lots of platform engineers. So lots of abstractions, like who were those abstractions designed for? Maybe walk us through one or two specific examples, golden paths, a policy, a workflow. maybe also that in hindsight, right, like really just makes sense when the consumer is a human, right?
Yeah, so yeah, as you said, we really took a greenfield approach, and it was everything is infrastructure as code from the beginning. You know, the most privileged access that we grant in those 700 accounts, including me and my top engineers, is all read only. Of course, there's break glass, but that gets alerted on. So I think very proud of what we've accomplished there. And we really leveraged, GitOps and Spacelift to help us do that. We created we tried to have a mindset of we're the platform engineering team, but we're also customers of our platform. So as we were building things, we made sure that we had, we were using all of the things that we built at the same time. And really, whenever we had a new use case, it was always, how do we build an opinionated Spacelift private module that we can use that enforces that golden path? And so, the example, I don't know, an S3 bucket, you can create as many S3 buckets as you want, but you have to use our module in order to do it, which includes all of our standard security settings, et cetera. And I think from an OPA policy perspective, as opposed to going down the path of every fine-grained, setting on each of these objects, we said, let's just create blanket policies that enforce for these resource types, you must use the standard modules that we've created. And so that's worked very well. We're now in the age of agents, we just say, hey, go look at Spacelift private module first whenever you're writing HCL, because if we have a module that's there, that's the one that needs to be used first. And so yeah, I think it's something that we're realizing now that, when you have a good, solid design and something out of left field comes that you weren't planning for and you weren't expecting, the real test of a good design is, does it adapt and can you roll with it? Or do you have to blow it up and start again? And I think that's been kind of my learning, is that the same things that mattered 3-4 years ago matter even more now, right? Strong version control, centralization, where, you can have one piece of code to impact all of the pipelines you have in the company and make sure they're all staying in sync. These are keys that I know the DORA report called out, that was really a validation for me with the CIO as well, to say these are all investments we've made over the last 5 years that are going to enable us to really take advantage of AI in the future. Well, now and in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree, right? Like, I think this is what we're seeing on the field, is like AI is really just like turbocharging the need for this like patterns. Speaking of which, right? So, Eric, like we were saying, DORA has been measuring essentially what makes for great human-centric delivery systems, right? For the last few years, what would you say are the design patterns that consistently win for human teams, right? Like we mentioned like a couple now, and is it like a subset or is it a superset of the ones that we're basically about to, I guess, like test under AI, and then we'll get to that part of the conversation in a second.
Sure. Yeah. Well, every year we publish what we call the core model, and the core model is a collection of the different capabilities that we have studied over the years that we consider to be foundational. So these are things like good culture, documentation quality, CI, CD, database change management, working in small batches, testing automation, et cetera, et cetera. What's interesting is that these, so one of the things that stood out in our research last year was that AI is an amplifier. And the important part of that statement is that it's a bidirectional amplifier. And so we're really seeing this, especially in the field as I'm working with enterprise customers, that the bottlenecks have shifted. So it's no longer, writing code, that's no big deal. And to a big extent, even like the specifications and the documentation, a lot of the PRD and the work that's normally done up front, a lot of that work is also pretty streamlined. So most of those bottlenecks have shifted more to the right toward the fundamentals that we've been talking about at DORA since 2014. So it's the rise of AI, and especially more recently with agents and harnesses, this is just making it more important to focus on those platform fundamentals so that those things don't become the bottleneck. And that's really what we're seeing a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Faisal, so I mean, you talk to many enterprises, right? Building on what Eric was just saying, like, what would you say are some of the, I guess, implicit assumptions baked in the kind of like typical internal developer platform today, and then how many of these platforms do you think are actually ready for what Chris was saying, right? This is kind of like 10x intake and volume.
Yeah. Great question. So obviously I work with plethora of customers across industries. And so I think what I would do is start from where I kind of guide them, right? Which is platform engineering has always been about one thing at its core, right? Let's not forget that, which is what? Reducing cognitive load, right? So developers can focus on delivering, right, value, which is rather than managing infrastructure, right? So in the human era, if I were to take a step back before adding AI to the mix, what did that mean, right? That meant golden paths, self-service portals, right? Terraform modules, Eric talked about it, paved road, right? We were building for a consumer who could read documentation, ask questions in Slack, and exercise judgment, right? So now put that aside, think about AI, right? The AI era, right? And that definition, Luca, still holds, right? Because the consumer has fundamentally changed. So now you're building not just for humans, but for AI agents as well, right? So going back to the question, so those two consumers have radically different needs, right? A human like myself, we can tolerate ambiguity in APIs, right? We can figure out, whereas an AI agent, they will confidently do exactly what you want it to do, right? So even if that means provisioning 50 environments like at midnight or 3 a.m, because nothing stopped it, right? So to borrow maybe just from you again, I think it's, having the right platform set with all the core pieces that is required out of it goes a long way in terms of AI adoption, right? Because the prerequisites for AI acceleration still the same, right? Reliable build, testing, strong telemetry, quality gates. So the foundation hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm. I mean, okay, that's a great, I think, jump off point. Let's get into the meaty part, I think. So because I think, we are, I think we're all trying to like make sense of, how are these platforms changing in this like agentic first enterprise, how are the reference architectures going to change? Like how do we piece all these different parts together? But I guess like, building on top of what Faisal was just saying, Eric, should we I feel like it's helpful often to just start with like, what are we measuring? Like, are we measuring, we will continue to measure the same things? Are we measuring the wrong things entirely? Should we replace, PR count, deploy frequencies, MTTR, with like AI first metrics, or like, how are you thinking about that? And then we can go into maybe a little bit of the architectural pieces.
Yeah, this is definitely something that we're thinking about for this year's research. I don't think that we have an exact plan, or I don't know that I can predict what that's going to look like in the future. What I do know, though, is what's currently successful is using specifications to drive iterative development in the smallest batches as possible. This gives the agents the ability to write code as close to properly as you can get, while then also being able to leverage the platform to test and to do this in smaller chunks. So I think, instead of trying to do everything in large batches, trying to do things in as small as batches as you can. So the reason I say this is because one of the ways that I think about the DORA metrics as they exist today is they are effectively a proxy for working in small batches. So I think at least in the near term that these metrics are going to still be a viable way to measure productivity, regardless of whether it's a human or an agent that's pushing these changes through. So I do think it's still a good way to look at it. Ask me again in a year, and my opinion might have completely changed.
Yeah, like I feel like all of our opinions all the time lately. I'm actually looking at Chris, go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, no, if I might jump in, this is something I feel passionate about because I went through, I think, a kind of a panic phase for a while, seeing all of this change, where I started questioning, am I the dinosaur? Right? Like, are there all these young people that are going to be AI native and go, oh, space lift and Terraform and Open Tofu and all of this? Like, come on, we just need agents and it's all there. I kind of really went through an identity crisis for a while. I can answer for us. What we really realized pretty quickly is all of our agentic work in the end is creating code. That's our model. It's creating pull requests. So yes, in our answer, all of those metrics are the same. And we have seen an explosion of number of pull requests, number of automated reviews, all of those. So I think for me, at least for now, it's more, when I see, and my CIO will come and like, hey, look at this tool. And it's connecting to the cloud APIs and making changes. Nope, we don't do that. We still don't do that, right? We don't give that access. It all goes through our Git flow process. And I think that's at least working for us still. It's an amplifier of what we had working, not something that's a, radically different model. Just my opinion, right?
No, I was just smiling because I wonder what would it look like if all your humans had read-only access and the agents were the only one that had right access. That'd be a really funny place to be. Yeah. I guess building on that, with this, obviously you guys are I think it seems like you're being very disciplined about how you're moving towards agents. Is there anything that broke still that you didn't expect? You, Chris, right? Or are there in general bottlenecks that you see emerging? You mentioned review, policy authoring, drift. What do you see?
Yeah, the bottleneck is the same bottleneck we've always had, I think, but it's a lot worse, which is people doing pull reviews, right? So you can create these amazing features quicker than ever, but so what we're really thinking about is how do we create an ecosystem where, I'm going to digress for a second, right? We joke on our team, how many of us have done pull request reviews with the, looks good to me, thumbs up, right? And it might be hundreds of lines of code if you've got a bad one, but you're okay, I know this engineer, I trust them, and you do it. So it's I think if we're all being honest, we've never really reviewed every single line of code for every pull request review that we've done. And now it's just that problem's worse. And I think a lot of folks and engineers on my team are thinking okay, we still, now it's worse. Now we need more people, more senior engineers to do more pull request reviews. On the other hand, when I think about what are good use cases for agents, it's when there's overwhelming things to do, right? When there's overwhelming data, overwhelming lines of code, overwhelming whatever. So we've not really done a lot here, but really tried to think about how can we make really, really good agentic peers that do the senior engineer pull request review. And if I'm being honest, if it's only catching 80% of the things that are wrong, it's probably better than a thumbs up, looks good to me pull request review from an overstressed senior engineer who used to have, 15 to review and now they have 50. So yeah. I don't know. I think that's the biggest bottleneck. And so how do we leverage AI to help that problem go away is really what we're asking ourselves now.
I love that. I also want to bring in, so I think I dropped a message to ask questions and I just realized in the public chat instead of the session chat, but we are getting back something. So Santiago is also asking, do you think IDPs, golden paths, paved roads, as we already know, will change in terms of is the self-service now for agents versus humans? So maybe I'll tie that into my question to you, Faisal, as well. So, are the existing building blocks, like the existing abstractions, like, this module, this templates, this golden paths, are they still the right interface? Or, do we need a layer underneath them? And maybe let's start there, because I have, like I said, we're doing some research internally as well in the community, and like, how do these reference architectures evolve, right? Like, I think, where's the sort of like agent API, where's the agent OS sitting at this point, I think is one of the really like interesting questions. But let's start with the abstractions and the interfaces maybe first.
Yeah, I think, when I think about this, is just like most existing golden paths and abstractions were built for human consumers, as I said before, right? So they work, right? Because human bring the context, right? They bring the judgment, they bring the tolerance. Agents don't, right? So in the AI era, right, the abstraction still matters, but it has to evolve into something much more explicit, right? Clear contracts, hard policy boundaries. A lot of things that I've seen is, in the age of AI, if you don't have upstream guardrails, service control policies, things like that, the agent is going to go and do things, right? So that human loop is kind of missing, right? So there's definitely less reliance on tribal knowledge, right? So the future is not replacing abstractions; it's just making them usable by both humans and agents. The other thing that I wanted to kind of address, and I kind of thought about early on in the conversation we were having, is that these contracts, right? They have to be machine readable contracts, right? So instead of README that says, make sure you tag all the resources, right? You need a policy layer that enforces it and returns a structured error when it's violated, right? So the agent needs to know in this phase that not just what to do, but then also what happens when it does something wrong, right? So explicit state machines, implicit workflows, right? Humans, we understand that, right? You run this after that. Involves waiting for previous steps to complete, right? So agents need that dependency made explicit, right? And ideally in a form that they can reason about and validate. So a lot of these things kind of factor in as I'm talking to customers.
Yeah, absolutely. What are you, what are you actually doing to get your org more, so if we go back to this architecture, right? Because I agree with you, Faisal, like I think like one of the key things that I'm seeing a lot is there is, humans have this like inherent advantage. So like, agents have this like huge advantage, which is like a lot of compute and a lot of, like can work 24/7, whatever. But then, humans have this like massive advantage when it comes to, especially like enterprise and like large organizations, which is context, right? Like these agents just don't have the right context, right? So like, are you, when you're thinking about like, internal developer platforms going into the sort of like agentic development platforms, or however we want to define them, right? Like, how maybe this is to you, Eric. Like, how are you seeing people, or how are you thinking from a research perspective? What are like design pattern best practices in terms of connecting all the tooling that Chris you were mentioning? It's still relevant, right? I mean, this is also what we've seen in the public markets, right? Like all the SaaS stock crash, and then now they're like back up because like, oh wait, actually you still need them, right? Like, how do you think about connecting all the tools that we're used to sit in this like internal developer platform reference architectures into this basically like agentic infrastructure and agentic operating system, and how do we feed them the right context, right, to like bridge the gap essentially?
Mm-hmm. So I mean, the way that I think about the IDP is it is the thing that allows the agents, when they're doing things like solutioning or planning, the context that it needs from an organizational perspective, because it's very important to understand what are the patterns of the organization, what are the security policies, what code has been written in the past, what patterns do they adhere to. And when the agent has access to those things, it helps keep the agent on track and adherent to whatever your organizational policy is. So let's take golden paths as an example. What we're doing is in the solutioning phase, or like the solutioning workflow, we're going out to the golden path catalogs to take a look at what are the golden paths, what are the appropriate things that we can choose from. So not letting the agents just create their own path, whatever they want. They actually have to choose a path that already exists, that's already been vetted, that has already passed the security checks and whatnot. And doing this, what I've seen gives enterprises so much more confidence to let agents do things like solution, and being okay with having a lighter touch from a review perspective, because they're already picking the paths that have been, reviewed and vetted and verified.
Yeah, I love that. All right, let's accelerate a little bit because I just noticed we want to leave some time for Q&A. So maybe like Chris, super quick. I guess going into the what's maybe pragmatic learnings or inputs that we can give to the audience. What are you pragmatically doing to keep shifting and making the org more agentic ready? Are you also thinking about changing org structure, or you talked about the tooling, like the stack for now stays the same? What are some of the like little adjustments that you're making already?
So I think the fundamental principle, as I've been hearing everyone talk, is enterprises are often messy and everyone has their own fiefdom that they've always done things a certain way. The beautiful thing, the opportunity that I had to be able to build everything greenfield is I consolidated it all. It's one Git organization. It's all of those Git repos. There's thousands of them that support those 700 plus AWS environments. They've all been provisioned by the same Terraform code that's been run through Spacelift. So when we want to adjust that, it's one place, we adjust it once and it goes everywhere. And I think what people outside of our engineering team are starting to realize is the power of simplicity. So just continuing to narrow down people's choices, right? And really make it enabling constraints. You can do it any way you want as long as you do it my way. But what does that unlock? So I think we're definitely continuing to consolidate the choices and say, why not use this platform? Because if there's a legitimate reason, that's an enhancement. If not, get on with it and use it. So I think we're continuing to simplify the choices. And then, the part I said earlier about like starting to think about how do we make a framework above where we're at that helps us with reviewing the pull requests and making sure we have agents that know how to check security issues better than even senior engineers, kind of the meta layer of what we do, and trying to focus on that.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, I'll just jump straight into maybe a rapid fire question so we can get a couple. I think I'm just looking at the app votes here. Do you see, maybe Faisal, you want to get this? Do you see a future where developers will request new platform features directly to AI all the way?
Yeah, I definitely feel that is coming. But I think that getting ahead of that is you still have to reframe developer experience as agent experience, right? So standardized development environments, right, with necessary tools. If you don't do that, that request that you just asked for, the question that you asked for, to build that environment, that's gonna be a little bit challenging. You still need to have adequate feedback loops, right, for your testing, security guardrails. You still have to have good documentation, but I see that coming for sure.
And one last one, I guess this is for you, Eric. 3 upvotes. Are DORA generating decision processes truly actionable in the dev space? And I guess I'll just extend the question to in the agentic era, are you sticking to this framework? Are you thinking about a different one? How is that evolving?
Yeah, well, we are constantly evolving everything that we do. And last year we introduced the AI capability model, which is an add-on to the core model that I was referencing earlier. So this AI capability model looks at the outcomes that organizations care about, and then works backwards and tries to understand what are the capabilities that an organization can lean into in order to drive those capabilities when you add AI into the mix. So I'll give you I'll give you two really good examples. One is user centrism. So what we saw last year was that teams that use AI that are not user-centric get worse when they introduce AI into their workflow. So if you are a team, and if you want to get better as a team, and you most certainly are using AI, well, then you also need to be user-centric. Another good example is we looked at the relationship of the internal developer platform and what happens to the platform, or what happens to the outcomes when you introduce AI. And as it turns out, in order to get organizational performance, organizational outcome from the use of AI, an internal developer platform is required. So what our data showed last year was that if you did not have a well-built platform, you weren't really getting organizational impact from the deployment of AI. You might be getting, localized improvements, at the individual level or at the team level, but to truly get to truly unlock organizational performance, you have to have that well-built internal developer platform. And obviously, I'm super biased because I'm passionate about this topic, but to me, that was a really cool finding. And it really resonates when you work with customers because it just makes sense, right? And in order to handle the volume of everything that's coming in, you need to have these automations in place in order to process everything that's coming. And it's only going to get crazier this year.
1,000 times agree, Eric. It was really validating to see that come from your report. And as I said, I'm using that with my boss now to say, see, look.
Yep.
Yeah, platform engineering is the way to roll out AI. I think we can end on that. Thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you for listening to us. We're being told off because we're overrunning now. So thank you, everybody, and thanks again to Spacelift for hosting us.
Thank you.
Thank you.